I think this is great. I'm glad the kids are here. You probably know why I'm here. I'm here to discuss the impending tax increase that you have proposed. This is in addition to the certain tax increase that's going to occur on the school property taxes because of the 23% increase that the school board has approved for the administrators and the pending teachers contract that's being negotiated, and they will also get a raise. There's no chance that they won't raise our school property taxes. And so I'm here to discuss the almost 25% increase in our county taxes over the last 2 years and the discussion that you had in the previous meeting. And just to let the kids know, a part of government is that our elected officials, and the commissioners are elected officials, they're here to work for the people. The people are in charge of the government. This is a representative government. Our elected officials work for us. You don't work for them, they work for us. And so sometimes when the public has a disagreement with our elected officials, we come to these meetings and we tell them how we feel. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we have discussions. Sometimes it's pleasant, these discussions. Sometimes it is not. But that's okay. That's the beautiful part of our constitutional republic. This is not a democracy, despite what you may have learned in school. The United States is a constitutional republic, and that means it's representative government. And so what does that mean? Representative government is we choose representatives to represent us in the government. They make choices on our behalf, but we still have a say in what happens. And that's what that means. So I'm really pleased that you guys are here. Some of you might hear something that's upsetting. I'm not upset. I'm just here to bring a message to our commissioners. So I want you to know that before we go ahead of time, before I proceed. And so I'm here to remind the commissioners that the primary function of government is security and the protection of our constitutional rights. And I was looking for a phrase to demonstrate that, and I found it in, coincidentally, the Alabama Constitution. In the Alabama Constitution, it says that the sole object and only legitimate end of government is to protect the citizen in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. And when the government assumes other functions, as it is a usurpation and oppression. Or that means for the kids that when the government does something outside of what the Constitution says, we have to remind them that that's not such a great thing. And today I come to reaffirm our understanding and commitment to the foundational principles of our nation. Principles that elected officials here have clearly forgotten or never understood. It is not the proper role of government to grant such powers outside of individual liberty, like welfare programs, schemes for redistributing wealth, and activities which coerce people into acting in accordance with a prescribed code of social planning. The government cannot claim the power to redistribute wealth or force reluctant citizens to perform acts of charity against their will. This is not your role. Yet you continue, our county government, to operate outside of that role. And I celebrate also the work of the Penn State Extension. I think it's wonderful work. I would remind people who want to fund your work through county governments that Penn State has a $5 billion with a B endowment, and I think the funding for these things should strictly come from the very wealthy alumni of Penn State and other outside donors. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, said, "With all these blessings, what more is necessary to make us a happy and prosperous people? Still one thing more, fellow citizens, a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take away from the mouth of labor the bread it had earned." Pike County has been neither frugal or wise. You have planned poorly. You have spent unwisely. You have squandered millions in taxpayer dollars for your own political gain. It is long past time that you reduce the size of this county's government in order to alleviate the burden of the taxpayer. Our founding fathers went to war over less than a 2% tax. Yet here we are, 250 years later, tolerating an out-of-control governmental bureaucracy with no end in sight and no plan to reduce its growing burden on taxpayers. Today I'm here to say enough is enough. It is incumbent upon you, our elected officials, to fix this broken system and reduce the size of this county government. When you had the state representative here last meeting, you should have demanded his vocal change on the state level, a policy change, a rewrite of burdensome regulations, something. Instead, Mr. Olsemer travels around the county calling for changing people's old license plates. Is this why we have representatives in Harrisburg? The local government should not be begging for our own money back from the Commonwealth. This is a backwards way of accounting. It is wasteful and goes against every principle of our founding. The government's role is not to dictate our lives, but to serve them, to protect us not just from threats, but from the diminishment of our liberties. Let us demand accountability when these roles are neglected or abused, as in this case. Let us educate ourselves and our peers on the importance of these foundational principles, and let us participate actively in our constitutional republic, ensuring that our government remains true to the duties of security and protection of our God-given rights, not to suffocate us with endless taxes. The French political economist Frederick Bastiat phrased so succinctly: life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place. It is your responsibility to secure our pursuit of happiness by alleviating the tax burden. Sadly, you have chosen to continuously and deliberately ignore that responsibility. You would rather make decisions that carry little political consequence rather than make comprehensive and fundamental changes to a system that needs desperate reconstruction. Yesterday, in his discussion of the federal omnibus budget currently being written, Congressman Chip Roy of Texas appropriately said the following: we're just fundamentally unserious about spending. As long as you have a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free. I'm going to read that again. We're just fundamentally unserious about spending, and I think you guys are too. As long as you have a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free. And I say to that, amen, Congressman Chip Roy. And the most infuriating part of the last meeting for me was being forced to listen to an economic lecture about you had no other alternatives but to raise our taxes because of COVID, inflation, healthcare costs, never mentioning once the size of this bloated bureaucracy, this bloated government, this county government. Not once, as if every service, every job, every function was fundamental and absolutely necessary in this county. Shame on you for raising taxes again. Shame on you for lying about it more than once when you were seeking re-election, Matt and Ron. Shame on you for your disingenuous excuses to cover for your own failings in governance. Shame on you for using the taxpayers, the citizens, as scapegoats of your poor leadership. The people should and will hold you accountable. I expect better from both of you as conservative Republicans. This I expect from Ms. Contreras. I'm very disappointed in this. There's been no further discussion in shrinking the size of the government. You guys could have easily looked at those options. Instead, you talked about other things that were outside the scope. It's really unfortunate. We're gonna get hit by you with the county tax. We're gonna get hit by you with the school property tax, and it's gotta end at some point. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Mr. Contreras, before you leave the podium, I do have a question for you.
Please.
Would you like to take this book, since you say that I'm the one that you would expect to overspend, and let me know what in particular you have an issue with and how you would remedy it?
So, to answer your question, so this is a great illustration for the children. So as I told you guys before.
Would you like the book, or do you have something in mind?
Can I just explain?
I'm
just talking to the kids for a second.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer your question.
Absolutely.
So as I said before, this is representative government. I am not a commissioner, but I can bring these items to the commissioners, and they're allowed to make changes or not make changes. Ms. Contreras is one of the, Mrs. Contreras, excuse me, is one of the commissioners, and she would like me to do her job for her. And frankly, that's not my position here. But in the future, I may be a commissioner, and when that opportunity happens, I will make changes to the government. I will make changes to that budget. I will shrink the size of this Pike County government. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Well, I
appreciate your time.
respectfully
Thank
would
you.
like to respond. I appreciate your remarks. No. I appreciate your remarks and I appreciate you being as respectful as possible. But what I would again ask is, at the beginning of your remarks, you said that we answer to the people, and you're absolutely right. But you also elect us to make decisions. And if you're not happy with those decisions, you're obviously welcome at any time, including the time that you spent talking with us and educating the children today, to give us a concrete criticism, right? Something substantive that we could go back and review to say, hey, maybe we did make an error here, or maybe we were absolutely right. So I was just simply asking from you, showing great concern here this morning, what in particular about this budget did you have an issue with, and what would you recommend to make better?
You should have put a freeze on spending immediately. You could have taken 20% from every department. There's lots of things. You could have eliminated departments. You could have eliminated positions. You could have eliminated county jobs. There are plenty of things. Again, Ms. Caceres, if you'd like to go over it, Mrs. Caceres, if you'd like to go over it with me, I'm happy to do that with you.
I would love to sit down
Well,
with
let's
you.
do that.
Absolutely.
Let's do that.
Kevin?